Welcome back to the StockTA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Steuer. Today, we're looking at a company that is rapidly evolving from a junior explorer into a developmental powerhouse in the silver and critical metal space. We're talking about Aftermath Silver, ticker AAG in Canada and AAGFF on the OTC. Please note this interview is being disseminated on behalf of Aftermath Silver. They recently hit a major milestone by securing 100% ownership of their flagship Berenguela project in Peru, a project that just isn't about silver, but also a massive source of copper and manganese. A few weeks back, they released some of the best drill intercepts in the company's history. And to walk us through the path to production, I'm pleased to be joined by Aftermath Chairman Michael Williams. Michael, you've had a busy start to 2026. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kim. We've been, I don't want to say lucky because we've got really good geological team, but just to give you an idea, over the last 18 months, we've drilled 82 drill holes. 70% of them have been what we call infill and 30% step outs, but we've hit on 95% of those drill holes. Now, if you look at our results, they've been, we've hit some stellar numbers that we've published, including as we move to the east of the project, we hit 157 meters of 1.12% copper with 290 grams of silver. And we have 7% manganese. So it was one of the best holes, I think, put out on the copper side in the industry, over the last couple of years. Very strong. And we're seeing some other holes significant to that one where we're hitting 100 meters of over 1% copper. So, and I think the holes that you were referencing were, 48 meters of 400 grams of silver. I'll pull the exact number in a second, but no, things have gone exceedingly well. And I would say this, if you look at Aftermath, you mentioned we're silver, copper, manganese. As a silver company, I think we're one of the largest undeveloped silver companies globally, but we also do have the copper and the manganese. But it's a good basket of metals. But at the same time, 80% of the value of Aftermath, I believe, is attributed to silver. And as you well know, silver's had a fantastic run over the last, call it 6 months. And if you watch our chart, it follows silver very closely. I think a lot of people in the space, primarily the retail crowd, realize if you like silver and silver leverage, Aftermath is a good way to play that.
No, that's great. I mean, you guys have done a lot, and it's really interesting to see, how your stock price has reacted to this news as well.
Yeah, I was referencing that silver hole. It was 48.5 meters of 438 grams and 2.2% copper. That was an excellent hole. No, unequivocally.
So what do you have coming up? What's the next phase as you expand on this project?
It's twofold. One, we're going to continue drilling. We do have several excellent exploration targets that are sort of getting away from the main ore body. One is what we call a skarn zone. And just to put it into perspective, Berenguela itself is a carbonate replacement deposit. This is a different style mineralization, but they both form from some intrusive event, millions of years ago, where those fluids flow into limestones in the case of the CRD, and then they flow into the skarn style mineralization. So we could have potentially another deposit close to Berenguela, and that'll be drill tested. Now, the drill always determines whether you make a discovery or not. But we are seeing, over 0.5% copper in the majority of our sampling at surface, and we're seeing the right type of mineralization. And I think we've even hit up to 2%. So that gives us a lot of geological hope that maybe there's the skarn there as well. That's what happens in these type of systems. And to the east is where we hit those higher copper grades. If we can continue that, I always describe Berenguela as a tier one asset, does well in any market. If we hit on those other two exploration targets, you potentially, setting yourself up to be maybe a world-class mining district if you have more than one deposit in the region. We just financed, we raised $20 million in December. Our largest shareholder is Eric Sprott. Sorry, I forgot his name for a second. Eric now owns approximately 25% of the company. It's significant for several reasons. Eric is a big silver fan, as you're probably aware of, but Eric is now also following some of the key manganese companies, and we were the first company that he was involved in to do that. So I think it's key. We're one of his biggest holdings. He holds over, I think it's 140 companies. And he took 50% of that 20 million raise in December. We did it without a warrant, and it was priced at 90 cents Canadian. So that's probably around 65, 70 cents American. So I think we've got enough cash moving forward. We're going to do, you asked me the key drivers of the company. There'll be the regional testing of those potential deposits. And number two is we're doing a pre-feasibility study. We've got enough data that we felt comfortable bypassing a preliminary economic assessment. We're going straight to pre-feasibility. So we'll put out more metallurgical work and we'll update the resource and then put out our first foray of the economic numbers, including some of the processing.
It's pretty impressive. I was going to ask you about the PFS because that's a big step, and to move as quickly as you guys have been moving, I think that shows a lot of confidence in what you're doing and where you think this is going to go.
Yeah, I agree. What we did, though, it's a different skill set going from exploration to development to eventually building and mining. And we added some new players to the team, really high-profile people within the industry, and they're capable of putting a deposit like Berenguela in Peru into production. They have processing experience. More importantly, they have processing experience with manganese, and they've been involved in large projects before. They're both Anglo-American people. So it gives us the confidence that when we do put out a pre-feasibility, it's going to be conservative, realistic, and I think a lot of people will pay attention when it comes out, which is this time next year, Q1 of next year.
And silver prices that a lot of these studies that companies have been using have been still in the 30s, and silver has been 60 to 80 lately. So even with that conservative number, you're still going to have some massive economic scale.
Yeah, if you look at in Canada, we call it a 43-101. It's our mineral resource estimate. We put one out last November, and we took 22% of our inferred went into measured and indicated, which is a huge increase predicated on those drill holes I mentioned. But the number we used for silver was, I believe might have been even $29. Talking with our engineers and people doing the pre-feasibility study, and also talking more importantly with the bankers and such, I think today you could put out 45 and feel comfortable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is Aftermath Silver AAGFF on the OTC for my American followers. As you can see, if you pulled up a chart of spot silver to this, they'd be almost identical. So our algorithm has them as neutral right now, both overall and short term, but that's been, to be honest, the whole silver market in general right now. And some of the juniors are still bearish. So I think you guys are showing a good bit of relative strength here. And you have a confluence of 18 is heavy in our scoring system. So you have heavy support at 0.63 and a light to medium resistance at 0.68, light resistance at 0.72. And then as you go above that, the confluence scores go down, which is the setups I look for in my own personal trading, because I think you guys do have some asymmetric risk here to the upside if silver takes off. So I didn't know if you had any comments on your share structure and how kind of your chart looks right now.
Well, we have 300 million shares. We trade a lot of shares a day. I think we have actually 320 million. Eric owns over 72 million of those. So it's a nice block to have. I think our split, if I include Eric, and I don't think anyone would argue that he's an institution in and of himself when it comes to investing in these companies. He's 25%. I think as silver goes, we're going to go. It depends what your view is on silver. I do know that a project like this and the pre-feasibility study will tell it from unequivocally. I have the advantage. What worries me as a chair executive with this company isn't where silver goes. And I'm thrilled where it is now, because when I picked up the asset, it was $17. And I thought, okay, if silver ever makes it to 30, that's fantastic. So I worry if silver goes backwards, what does it stress test to? And I think those numbers are very good also. So from that point, we're good. What the shareholders get, though, it's like buying, if you were to buy a junior company financing and they offer you a warrant as part of the unit, the warrant on Aftermath is the manganese and somewhat the copper. The copper offsets the cost of the silver, but it gives our shareholders potentially something very special. We could be, when I say manganese, there's lots of manganese globally. There's very little manganese, though, that can be used in electrical vehicle batteries. Every new battery chemistry has an M in it for manganese. And later on, maybe another show, we can get into exactly what manganese does in those battery matrices. But it is a critical metal for that purpose. And we give our shareholders that exposure, and they're really only paying for the silver. And the silver offers them tremendous leverage. So I think we're well positioned. We trade 1.5 million shares a day. That's not insignificant.
I agree with you. I think the manganese is a real kicker here, because you don't see a lot of silver projects at your scale that have this high level concentration of manganese. So two parts of this question here. Manganese is a critical mineral. It is, not as common as some of these other metals. And the US government has been very proactive in trying to reshore, domestic production of said critical minerals. So is that something you could see potentially down the road? Has the government reached out to you about the manganese?
Yes. Before I comment, though, I'll add to that. The market's bifurcating on critical metals. You're either going to get your metals processed in China, where, in the case of manganese, 92% of all manganese is processed in China. They're years ahead of us, both from securing resources, but also their engineering. And that's where we need to catch up. But the United States government has made a conscious effort, as you're aware, to bridge that gap. I don't know if we'll catch them, but we're going to bridge it. And we were asked to present to some high-level individuals within the Pentagon and Department of Energy last month. And what they're trying to do is secure assets like ours, that they can make a sovereign supply of manganese that's in the Western Hemisphere. We're in Peru. That works perfectly, assuming the metallurgy fits and everything. And it's twofold. One is probably military applications. A lot of the drones do and will use manganese. And the US has made a conscious effort that they're going to, like most countries, increase their drone supply. So that's, what we could do is maybe supply some of the manganese potentially for that, but also for the US domestic industry. Right now, they're getting it from China. That needs to stop. And I think that's where the world is going. So we're actually looking at maybe building a processing facility for manganese in the state of Georgia. There's some definite incentives. It's on the coast. Our product can go into the United States through 15 rail lines. It can go back on a boat and go to Europe if necessary. And look, we could be one of the biggest producers of high purity manganese for EV batteries in the world. So we will be a significant player in that field. And it's not easy. You need to get that product to 99.9% purity. We've done that on bench scale testing. Now we're ramping it up as part of the PFS. Manganese has always been a difficult metal to deal with. We've now demonstrated that through hydromet, which is a known process, we can separate copper, silver, and manganese out. They were in our last mineral resource update. I think it was 94% for copper, 95% for silver, and 85% for the manganese. So we've addressed a lot of the big issues. Now it's just a case of building this out. My druthers, because of the monies involved, would be to go to the United States. I think there's a lot more value in it for the shareholders, because the United States and the West pay a lot higher price per ton than you get in China.
Nice. That's really interesting. If the government were to get involved and you see them, they've taken stakes in other companies, they do offtake agreements. What do you think would be best shareholder value for your company? Would you want them as strategic partners? Would you want the offtake agreement? How would you, in an ideal world, try to structure that?
Well, if the USG is a strategic partner, I think what I've seen the capital markets recognize that right away as accretive. I think what it does, it gives the investing in the capital markets public confidence that if the US government does want your product, you've got a viable product. These critical metals aren't easy to put into production. It's all about processing. And I think our processing team rivals that of maybe some of the Chinese engineering groups. So that I think that's why the U.S. likes what we're doing, and we can deliver a lot of resource. So yeah.
And I mean, in the news, everything I've read about China since the whole conflict in the Middle East with Iran has started is they've either tightened their export controls or completely stopped exporting certain magnets, certain critical minerals to the United States. So you guys could be in the right place at the right time if this continues.
I think we are, and I'll share a comment with yourself and your audience that I heard when we were in Washington, D.C. If you guys are going to do something, do it within the next 3 years because you never know. But this administration is determined to acquire critical metals and access to critical metals for the United States. So, and that time frame meets, and what we're trying to accomplish. We were asked, can you fast track our project? Yes, somewhat. You can't get ahead of your science, but that our goal would be to meet their deadlines, and they're willing to more than be helpful. There'll be a lot of money made available, both as equity partners and I think as grants and loans to make sure projects come under the U.S. sphere. And when I say U.S., I'm really referring to the West because the United States has partner countries that also need these metals.
And they could help. I mean, you guys have had pretty good luck with Peru with the permitting. You got 100% ownership. You seem to have good local support. So that could be another kicker is, having Uncle Sam as a partner will help speed things along in Peru potentially, correct?
Look, I was told by a high-ranking Peruvian diplomat that Peru would rather the U.S. start to receive their metals than go to China. Nothing against China, but China is taking a lot of Peru's copper. They would be more comfortable having it also go to the U.S. I think Peru, Chile are more in the U.S., the West camp than they are China. It doesn't do anyone any good if the majority of the commodities go to China. That needs to change. And right now, 55% of copper is going to China. I think Peru would help us with the permitting. And to your point, we've got good community relations because we do everything to World Bank standards there. And you have to have the local guys. Now, and this isn't Peru, this is Latin America, probably Africa. If you don't have the local people on side, you are going to have permitting issues.
I think this is really impressive, and thank you for sharing this because I think this will really resonate with my audience. As we wrap up here, so if we look, 6 months ahead, what do you think is the biggest fundamental driver of your company?
Well, several things. Look for some drill results. We've got another set coming out shortly from drilling we did at the end of last year. But also look at those copper targets we're about to drill. The one on the skarn, I think it's called Refugio, which is 2.5, I almost said kilometers, 2.5 miles away from Berenguela. And then later on this year, follow the drilling we're going to do to follow up that 150-meter intercept. Those are some of the geological aspects you should look. Look for more met news, but look for the pre-feasibility study out in a year.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I think we covered a lot, both from the mining perspective, the geopolitical perspective. So I think, for my listeners, if you're looking for not only a silver play, but a manganese/critical minerals play, I think you gotta be on people's watch list here because I think you guys have so much coming up.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So That's it for us. Thank you for joining. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our next CEO deep dive. I'm Kevin Steuer. Thanks for joining us.